Meet Shannon Morrall, a director, writer, actor, and my former roommate, currently getting her MFA in film production from the University of Southern California.
Shannon most recently had the chance to direct her first documentary short about the fight against the invasive lionfish in her home state of Florida. But Shannon aspires to share stories on a more epic scale.
Welcome to Scratch, Claw, Push, a podcast about artists clawing out a place for themselves in the world. I'm Billy Jo Cones.
And I'm Brendan Duke. Let's go. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Shannon Morrall.
Shannon Morrall. I will let Billy inaugurate you or baptize you in the challenge that we have all of our guests do up front.
Okay.
Yes, but Brandon, can I ask you a favor?
Yes.
Can you run the timer this time? Because my phone is in the other room.
Oh, okay. I get the honor of running the timer. Hold on now.
All right.
This is special indeed.
So what we do is just have our guests give a brief rundown, 60 seconds overview of like who you are, what you do, and that's it. So like your CV in 60 seconds.
Okay, I can try.
Everybody said that, but I think I only had one person go over so far. So
yes, out of we've had 5 people do it so far, and only one went over, and it was only by like 3 or 4 seconds, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Everyone else has been under by 3 seconds or 4 seconds. So yeah.
All right, Shannon, I will cue you in 3, 2, 1, go.
All right. I am Shannon Morrall. I'm a filmmaker based in Los Angeles, California. And I got my start in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, making a lot of films in the South. Moved to New York, trained in acting for a little while, and that's where I really got my creative start. Transitioned into filmmaking when I realized I really liked having a lot more power and control over the making of the art. And ever since then, I've been working my way up by making indie shorts, working at different film festivals in both Atlanta and New York. And ultimately, I just stepped over to Los Angeles for the first time a year and a half ago to get my master's in filmmaking at USC School of Cinematic Arts. And I guess my stuff, what I love more than anything is, I guess, like magical realism, big adventure stories. Like if I could make any movie, I would love Pirates of the Caribbean. So that's me in a nutshell.
All right, you only missed it by a couple of seconds. You went just a little over, but that's all right. That's still pretty good.
I could see her sensing the time was like, she's like, it's almost up.
It's concurring with Billy's theory that people just instinctively know how much time a minute is.
I believe
That's true. Yeah. Good biological clock in here, even though I didn't finish my sentence in time, but good practice.
Yeah, I'm convinced that people really, really can feel it. But yeah, so let's start off. So Shannon and I met because she and our other roommate Maxwell moved from New York to Atlanta to act. And so we were all in the house together at the beginning of the pandemic. Then the pandemic shut everything down. Shannon moved back to Florida for a bit, came back, made a film in Florida, made a short film for Maxwell here, a very short one. And then came back here for a bit, editing the film, and then eventually moved off away from us. But yeah, so our podcast is basically all about people clawing out a space for their creativity. And I know, Shannon, that you are somebody who is very driven. And just to Brandon, give you and our listeners an idea, like Shannon was always working when she was here. Like she'd get up in the morning, she'd be tutoring people virtually, she'd be doing other work. She was doing some work for some film festivals here. And then she'd be working on her own stuff. And it was just constant. Like Shannon was so all about getting her stuff done. And I feel like, in some ways that's, if you want to get somewhere, I feel like it's a little bit of what you just have to do, not if you're not privileged enough to have family helping you, or, you know, just be a whatever, Mary Rich, I guess, then you just kind of gotta, make it happen. So going off of that, I guess, I want to ask, Shannon, like, what kind of drives you to work that hard?
Hmm. I mean, it's a stereotypical answer of just passion. I am at my happiest when I'm doing stuff, particularly stuff that scratches my creative itch. Um, and so I'm just doing this for fun and also putting in the work to hopefully be able to do this for fun for a living. Um,
Hmm.
and it's interesting you mentioned that I was always working, because that's kind of like, it's a great asset to my work, but it's also kind of my fatal flaw in that I often kind of get just overwhelmed and by throwing myself into the task at hand and into the project. And so I've been working on balance recently. But yeah, ultimately, I think it's my favorite thing to do, to get a creative project and just dive in. And so I kind of get lost in it. Yeah.
So I've like your most recent project. I've that caught my eye. Spear, Spatula, Submarine, and
Yeah.
I'm assuming that this is the obviously the Florida project.
Yes.
And it's a. I'm assuming
Not
is
the
this
one I
a
was talking about.
yeah, is this a feature length or a short?
It's a short. It's a short documentary about ocean conservation. Yeah.
Well, tell us more about that because
Yeah.
I'm
So a short documentary about ocean conservation, specifically the lionfish invasion. It's an invasive species that was released off the coast of Florida in like the 80s. Someone like released their pets, a couple of them. They've narrowed it down to like 7 initial lionfish released into the Atlantic. It has taken over the Atlantic as far north as like Rhode Island, as far south as Brazil, Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean. And the lionfish, because it has no natural predators, uh, it just like eats everything in sight, and it has nothing to call its numbers. So you have these Floridians and these humans who are actually the solution for once. And they, hand spear them, and you have all these efforts to try and remove them. So that's what the film's about. And it's a short documentary. It's like 12 and a half minutes. And we had enough to make it like a feature. But my goal for the film was, okay, what's the goal of this project? I would like to raise awareness. And I think short and sweet, something shareable and clickable, and send it via an email. I worked really hard to get it down to as short as possible. So that's the goal. And we're making the film festival circuit now over the next year. And then it'll be up for everybody to see and hopefully teach everybody something about saving the reef.
So this was a new challenge for you, right? I mean, did you have to do underwater filming then for this? And
We did, yeah. So I am not a diver. I've unlocked a new life dream, which is to become a diver, because the footage we had was beautiful of just the stuff that's um, out there just off the coast of where I grew up in Fort Lauderdale. But I communicated with an underwater cinematographer alongside the DP, and we all had a lot of pre-production meetings where we storyboarded kind of like crazy. Of It's documentary, and we still had a storyboard, just of I wanted to frame these spear fishermen as kind of hero characters. So what shots do you need to make this guy look like a hero as he's just doing his thing, which we know what it looks like already? How do we make that cinematic? So lots of storyboards and meetings with the underwater camera diver beforehand. Then we also kind of came up with like a hand signal system so that he could work with the subject to be like, okay, hold on, don't spear the fish yet because I'm getting focus, or, very base kind of sign languagey things to communicate underwater. But that was a new challenge. This was also my first documentary film, because I'm a narrative filmmaker and have done only narrative work before this. So lots of learning, lots of new challenges, but I think it's the best project I've made to date, definitely.
Well, even in documentary, I mean, my mom used to make me watch a lot of nature shows when I was a kid, and there's always a hero, there's always a villain, there's always drama. It's not, like when the lion's stalking the antelope, it's like you're rooting, you know, in theory you're rooting for the antelope, but I think some people might be on the other side. But,
Yeah.
it's like there's always a struggle, there's always drama and a story arc sort of, right? So
Hmm.
I think the best documentaries sort of find that. Um, how did you go about coming up with that with the storyboard?
Yeah, so what's interesting about this is that I the story that I pitched to get the funding is almost exactly the film that I got, which I don't think is very common for documentary because it's always like, okay, here's an interesting guy and we're going to follow him for a while and maybe a story will come together and we'll put it together when we shoot a lot. But because this is an environmental issue that I could learn everything I needed to know about these people on the internet and just my own research before we ever set out filming. So I was able to kind of, I talked to a lot of people in the lionfish community to pick my subjects and find the right people because you need people who are interesting and charismatic. A lot of wonderful people doing it, but if they're not charismatic, then they're not so fun to watch. Found my subjects. Okay. Um, Once I did that, I just kind of shaped out the arc. And you're exactly right. There is like, and here's the heart section of the film where I'm going to make sure I ask these people about, uh, what does the ocean mean to you? And hope that they give me some wonderful heart pulling on heartstrings stuff. And we had the submarine guy, he admitted, like, I'm a veteran and I really struggle with my war trauma, and going into the ocean, it's healing for me. And I think it's healing for everyone. And that's stuff you can't plan. But I was able to kind of craft questions around story beats that I wanted to get in order to evoke that from him. So, yeah, interesting process.
So was it difficult to, or was it easy just because you've done like narrative films before to just come in with that lens of saying, okay, here these are, I'm going to find my protagonists, and then the villain is obviously the fish, and then finding your, like, I guess your main characters and then your supporting characters. Is it kind of like you're almost doing this script writing thing in your head as you're sifting through reality?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned the villain is the fish. And in my pitch, I was just like, hey, this is an action movie, first of all. And you've got the good guys and the bad guys. And that's how I want to develop this and approach it. And the foundation that supported the film and executive produced it, they picked 3 projects. And they told me, like, yeah, you're the only one who came in as like a narrative filmmaker background and had fleshed out like a story and story arc, whereas the other people that they chose to develop documentaries were experts in the field of the topic itself. So I am not a lionfish expert. I am not a marine biologist. I worked closely with the scientist from NOAA to fact check the film, but definitely I think my narrative background helped make the film a story, make it a movie.
So what do you hope to do with this? I mean, obviously it's already at some festivals, right?
Yeah.
What I mean, I personally am rooting for you for, the Oscars. So
Thank
because
you.
they do documentaries first, right?
Thank you.
So yeah. So what are your hopes for the film? What do you want to do with it?
Yeah, I thank you. I don't think the film's going to win an Oscar. But it's interesting because when you look at films that win Oscars, in this film, like, there are pieces, there are ingredients that need to be present to get to that stage. And I think this film did exactly what I wanted it to, of like, it's an awareness piece. So, like, as far as the issue itself, I'd love to, once it's out there, coordinate with lionfish communities and like screen it in a town where maybe they have a hunting derby or festival a couple weeks later, so people who've never heard of it can like sign up within a timely manner, and, oh, this event's happening right next to me. Yeah, so raising awareness, I know that that's going to happen. For my career, though, as far as a filmmaker and what's next, this was a really, really big undertaking. And I have gotten to the point where I don't take on a new project lightly. Like, I feel like it really needs to level me up in some way as I'm working my way towards my goals. And the hope is that I get into film festivals that I've never been able to get into before. So, level up my film festival acceptances, which has already happened. We got into an Oscar qualifying film fest, and I'd never done that with one of my films before. Um, yeah, so it's like, okay, first festival response, and I'm already happy. I think
Which festival was it?
it was AmDocs, so American Documentary Film Festival in Palm Springs, and it was wonderful. Like, it was the first time that I'd gone to a festival, and like they housed us. It was really like a celebration of my work. So it was a really good experience, very validating as an artist. And after that, I think it's just like resume building, and I can put this on my resume. I can be proud to send this out to people and hopefully get other work. And one big goal, I think, is financing. And I've heard, fingers crossed, that once one um, executive producer or foundation or grant organization decides to give you money, it hopefully opens the door um, to when you apply to more funding for future projects,
Mm.
because it does make sense to have that on your resume and say, hey, these people trusted me, she delivered, um, versus someone who's never gotten that first foot in the door. So my goal is to keep working on this and apply to finance future films. Yeah.
So you said that you have strong criteria about what you do moving forward. I'm curious where that leaves your other projects. I mean, obviously they're done, they're in the can. Um, but, with Bridge or with the project that you were working on writing with Chandler, are you still working on those at all? Do you have hopes to create the thing you were working on with Chandler, which is about your own experiences with squatters, sort of based on that experience?
Yeah. So that was a wild experience, a traumatic experience. And because of that, they say, write what you know. My best friend Chandler, who experienced it with me, wrote a show Bible and a pilot for a TV show surrounding it. I have diverted my attention away from that. And it has come down to me assessing my goals. And you look at that project, and that project got like some recognition from Sundance Ignite and second round in the Sundance Development Lab and stuff like that. So it was getting attention because it was such an awful, traumatic, like real story. But when I look at what sort of filmmaker I want to be a big adventure filmmaker. And like I mentioned at the top, Pirates of the Caribbean type stuff. And this film was like a grounded drama, you know, and it's just not really what I want to, the work that I want to create. We created it because we were like, oh, this might be a gateway in. But as far as picking the time and energy that you put something towards, if you're going to spend years at a project, make sure it aligns with the goals that you have. And part of that was, do I think that do I need to sell this personal story, or do I think that one of my other stories that just comes from me and my imagination can also open those doors? Do I believe in myself enough to be able to think I can get those projects off the ground as well if I put the same time and energy into it? And so I'm taking that leap and trying to divert into projects that really spark who I am as an artist, I think.
Juggling has definitely become a theme on this show, I guess, like, because especially if for writers and directors, or whether it's films or podcasts or, what a theater or anything, you've always got like a few things for whatever's out there. There's probably like a few things kind of on the back burner or on the stove, you know, and how do you determine what kind of gets to come to the forefront? I know obviously sometimes there's certain things that might scratch that creative itch, like you said, oh, I really like you want to do the big adventure thing. You got now you can go do this the spear fishing thing in Florida, or like you've got a number of shorts. Is it sometime like how do you? I guess like a way because I'm sure there's certain things you say, okay, well, someone's going to pay me for this, so I need to go, get this money and then use it. I can hopefully use it over here. What
Yeah.
is that process like for you of determining kind of what comes to the forefront versus what kind of just stays on the burners?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I think my approach has changed over the years. And um, some of the people in my community, when I won this grant, because I saw the grant for the documentary on Instagram. It was an ad on Instagram, and I was like, I'll apply, and I got it. And I was also in grad school at the time of shooting. And this past year has been really rough because that was very hard to juggle. I was flying back and forth to Florida while getting my graduate degree in Los Angeles. Um, Very tough. And people have said, hey, this is a side quest. This isn't a Pirates of the Caribbean-esque movie. Like, why did you take this on? But I think having a strong sense of what my goals for the future are, short term and long term, kind of helps me suss out what I need to put my time to. So um, I saw many benefits for this grant opportunity in that, like I said, it opens the door for further funding potentially. It's going to be maybe the highest production value film that I've had to date, and it's something that I didn't have yet. Moving forward, I have a bunch of story ideas all the time. Which ones do I decide like this could have legs and both be practical and along with the dreamy side of artistry? I'm trying to find things that are hot right now in the industry and have a lot of industry support, and also coincide with what I like to do. So if I like to do big adventure stuff, there's not a lot you can do with that in the indie filmmaking world, which is where I'm at right now. I love fantasy, and there's not fantasy films aren't like taking sweeping awards at festivals right now and getting you that recognition. My goals for the future are I need to get a really great, shiny narrative short at this point, better than anything I've done. So the Lionfish documentary equivalent, but a narrative short, and I need to get a feature script. So how do I go about getting a shiny narrative short? I am interested in environmental issues and conservation and all that. And I've kind of determined that you can find an adventure in all sorts of non-fantasy-esque, period piece-esque stories. Like there's adventure in the everyday. And where there's a lot of opportunity right now is climate content, and conservation content or general science content. There's a lot of funding out there, a lot of opportunities in the narrative world for that. So I've identified, okay, my next short is going to be a scientist, and she's going to go on, we're going to make science really cool the same way I made, hunting lionfish really cool. But this is going to be narrative, and hopefully it'll bridge that, those two sides of this is exciting to me, and it's also something that can hopefully garner attention and level me up career-wise.
So I'm not sure if you're aware. I'm just curious if
Mm.
if you have an idea of what that's going to be. My stepsister was stationed at McMurdo at in Antarctica for 2 months this last winter.
Oh,
Um, like
that's
December and
cool.
January. Yeah, she's in the reserves, and so she got stationed at McMurdo for 2 months. And I
Wow.
was like, oh my God, she's Mexican. So I was like, oh, you're Mexican and you're going to be at McMurdo. Are you going to survive? They said it was 80 degrees inside the station, so it's fine. But anyway, I was not aware because I actually met a fellow voice actor who had been stationed at McMurdo during the pandemic. Not,
Oh, wow.
he was stationed there before the pandemic, but I met him during the pandemic. And I ended up doing trivia with a bunch of people who had all been at McMurdo and
Mm.
had done trivia at McMurdo at different times. And so, like, this is during the pandemic, like, we're doing Zoom with all these people who had been in Antarctica. But I didn't know until recently that Antarctica, they have an artist program down there. So, yes, but it is a conservation thing, so it has to be something, whatever you're creating has to be something that is aimed towards, it still could be a narrative thing, but it has to be aimed towards getting awareness of climate change and things like that. So, just throwing that out there.
And
That's
you
what we
must have a really strong tolerance to really cold weather.
Right.
that is going to be a
Also,
challenge for me, but otherwise,
also, Iceland has an artist in residency program that a guy I knew from karaoke just went to this last year too. So
wow.
just there are options in places that you wouldn't expect them, I think.
One thing, like with that science idea that I still have to pinpoint what exact like animal or conservation effort I want to focus on. And I was like, phytoplankton. I really want to write this story about phytoplankton, but really all the research is done in the Arctic and Antarctica. Like, that's too far away. But maybe it's not. That's crazy.
I
So,
like to
This
believe,
this is why you want to be friends with Billy Joe Combs, because she has all these random like connections
yeah,
and stuff that you just
opportunities.
like. Wait, I didn't know you knew that person over way over there and over here. And
Yeah.
I
Oh,
mean, there I pick up people and things and stuff, but mostly it's just I like to believe, I think Shannon does too, in the power of possibility, that there's always
hmm
that more things are possible than you think are possible. So, and both of those places would epic sort of landscapes that would lead to really beautiful cinematography, right? So,
right.
Iceland is just some of the stuff I've seen. God, I used to follow this one. She was a professional photographer. I don't know if you would call her an influencer now, but
Hmm.
she actually was based out of Iceland for a while, and she was a professional photographer, and her husband at the time, who was with her and shot a lot of her stuff, also a pro. And some of the footage they got of that place would just put your jaw on the floor. It's just gorgeous country,
Must
and
have
they were there too
yeah.
when like some of the volcanoes were erupting. So you're just like watching this stuff, like, okay, I need to like put down my tab and go put this up on my smart TV because this looks amazing.
I've been
Yeah.
there twice. I can confirm it is amazing. And if you end up going to Iceland, I do have one friend who lives there. So, there you go.
Okay, well, we'll
Throwing
talk.
that
Well, damn,
He's
Shannon, you
got
need some extra crew. I'm available.
heck
out
yeah.
there.
This is how projects come together right here.
I can fetch a mean cup of coffee.
Hmm, cool. Well, that's awesome. It's interesting because in the past year, I've kind of revamped my own social media, not in what I'm posting, but in who I'm following. And I
Mm.
like have my real life friends that I know and I follow, but anybody else, I go to foundations, grant organizations. I make it essentially my own like film opportunity newsletter that I can scroll because I'm addicted to my phone, and if I'm going to be scrolling, I might as well fill it with like actually useful information. So that's how, once I got this first grant, I realized that all these organizations out there, they have all these opportunities available, and you can just like click follow, and then they will remind you and say deadlines this week and do this. And yeah, I think that's awesome.
Well, I can't wait to see what else you do. Because, like, going back to, so you have this idea of like the adventure and whatever. So when do you think that started? When did your like inspiration? What was your earliest like inspiration in that realm?
Yeah, it's interesting because applying to film school, I had to write a lot of essays about who I am as a filmmaker, and I hadn't really figured it out until I was prompted to figure it out. So I did a lot of reflecting, and um, my taste has been informed by what I grew up watching, which was my family would go to the movies or sit at the living room and watch movies, and that's what we did together and to connect. And so they obviously had to be, family friendly movies. So a lot of the stories that I really like are kind of fun for all audiences, kind of deal, and just that fun. And I think escapism of, you have the ability to go anywhere in the world to tell any sort of story, why anchor yourself in reality? And I know there's a lot of value in the realism storytelling as well, but that's the appeal for me of just like, let's go somewhere that I can't go on my own everyday life.
I have like a two-part question here. So I
Yeah.
noticed on your website you've already got like a few shorts. Were
Mhm.
those pre or post film school?
Those were pre-film school.
Okay, so that leads me to my next question. There's a
Mhm.
lot of people that go the film school route first, and then they can spend years and years not actually making films. And
Mm.
you did the thing where you actually, and then there's other people who will go just start doing the thing, and they never bother with film school. So
Hmm.
what prompted you, even though you were already doing shorts, to say, okay, now I have to go the film school route?
Yeah. I think a big push was the pandemic, which was I had moved from New York to Atlanta for and was ready to like lay my roots down at Atlanta and let's do this thing down here. And I loved Atlanta so much. But then the pandemic happened. And as we all know, things came to a full stop. And ultimately, I think in that dead zone time of just like twiddling my thumbs, I made one short. And then I said, I think I want to make this a short to apply to grad school because I don't really know where to go next. And I also think that I'm someone who, while making all these short films pre film school, I kind of wore every hat and did every job. And I would write it, direct it, produce it, edit it, sound design it, like too many things for one person to do. And I think a big appeal of film school is meeting people who are super talented, who like their thing is sound design. They geek out on sound design and they love that just as much as you love directing, and meet each other and work together. So I guess ultimately meeting future collaborators was a big thing. In addition to, I call it like the greatest gift I'll ever give myself, like of my life, is choosing to take the leap and go to grad school for film, because I have 3 years to truly just learn, sit back, experiment, and work on craft instead of necessarily craft plus gotta get me somewhere. So in a lot of ways, it's taken pressure off, I think.
That's such a great point, Shannon. And I had applied to grad school for acting at one point, and there's good and bad. It's like if you go, you get a lot of connections, you get a lot of opportunities, like you said, to just focus on that and not have to worry about everything else for a while. Um, and then there's the bad of getting out of school with lots of debt. So I ended up not going. But the one thing I really thought would be amazing about going is just that you get that time to focus on forming really specific skills, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So how much
And
longer do you have? Oh, sorry.
I have a year and a half left of it, so I'm
Mhm.
smack dab in the middle. And something that I didn't know going into film school was, I have experience doing all these different jobs. Which one do I like the best? Which one do I want to be my career? Because,
Mm,
um, pursuing directing, much like acting, is hard. Like, pursuing any craft within this field is difficult, but directing, I think, kind of like acting, is like, no, you really gotta hustle, and you can't be like paid on indie projects to be a director, but get paid as the sound designer or colorist on an indie project, and that's how you can, you know, uh, pay your bills and stuff. So I think I was like, okay, I'll go in and I'll maybe pick up sound design as a money making skill while hopefully pursuing directing as my passion. Um, and honestly, I haven't really done that yet. I haven't been developing my backup skill. I've
mm.
just been kind of taking all of my classes, putting all my efforts into directing and producing because um, I don't know. I'm really taking a leap on myself here, and have been for the past like 2 years of just like, no, try for the very best. And I think that comes from, I got into NYU Tisch for acting for undergrad, and my dream was to be an actor back in the day. And it was my dream school. And ultimately, I decided not to go because I could have gone on scholarship to a different university for an academic degree, and that was so much more practical than going to art school and giving that a shot. And I look at myself, and 10 years later, I'm still pursuing the same thing. I mean, directing versus acting, but I'm still pursuing the arts. And I think it's time for me to just like give it a real shot and put everything into it and stop focusing on the backups. I think I have enough backups at this point.
So your backups, I mean, you went to school for political science, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah,
And
international political economics. So, but really a lot of what I was doing, right?
and
Very different.
and you speak Mandarin.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
poorly probably at this point because it's been a while, but I have a bunch of Chinese friends at USC and they're getting me back up there. But yeah, so that was something I'm also passionate about. I mean, something about me is that I meet a lot of creatives who are like, I will die if I can't do this. And I'm like, I won't die if I can't do this. I could do all sorts of things and be happy. I love teaching. I love working with kids. And I think that's what kind of gives me a sense of calm while pursuing this, because it's like, oh, yeah, I can hopefully enjoy the ride while I'm on it. I'm not going to wait to be happy until I reach that final destination. But yeah, and it's interesting that I'm doing this documentary and getting into like nonprofit filmmaking and stuff like that, because right out of school and during school, I was focusing on like international humanitarian aid and like work that makes a difference and all that. Ultimately, I found it extremely depressing. Like the people who are on the ground making these like incremental changes to make the world a better place have hearts of gold and like just, I think, a heart of steel as well, because you put a lot of effort into things and still see all the bad in the world. So that wasn't for me on the daily, you know? But then transitioning to filmmaking, it's like, oh, you can still make a difference with media. I think the power of media is extremely strong and influences society a lot more than you might think at first
I mean,
glance.
one could make a strong argument that media has probably been like, if I were to go do like my doctorate well, I have to get my master's first, but in communications, I would do a whole thing about like media and civil rights, because you look at radio comes around in what, like 1912, so about 10 years later, you get women's suffrage, and TV comes on like around, becomes mainstream about the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
So then like late 50s to up to like mid to late 60s, then you get the civil rights movement. So then you get the internet like coming on in the late 90s, and then kind of really kind of blooming in the early 2000s. Then you get gay marriage gets passed, and now it's, so you can almost look at like any time there was like a big leap in media, that there's a big leap. There's eventually some kind of like, I don't know what you call like a raising in consciousness, or some kind of like civil rights leap that kind of follows within like a decade or two.
Yeah.
And it's just something I've noticed over time and go like, wow, that is, and you can say, well, because I mean, you just look at with social media, just how much more aware we are of stuff. Like, I mean, look at the when the Black Lives Matters march is like all over, because we were all part of it. Is we were all sitting at home, like scrolling, doom scrolling on our phones, and then the stuff you see, and you just like, and then you get it spurred to action, because now you're, this thing that you may have been blissfully unaware of before, now is suddenly like, on right there on your phone. So I mean, it's, you can make a strong argument. You can't say that media doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it comes down to exposure, exposing people to ideas or visuals. Two men holding hands was a commercial that happened maybe 20 years ago. And I grew up in the South, and there were people around me when we saw that bristled and were uncomfortable when they saw it. And now I talk to those same people, and they have no discomfort around homosexuality, when they once were just like, I don't like looking at that. And it's because they'd never seen it before. They didn't know it. And now just by the sheer power of like TV shows and putting representation of like, these are real people and they are human beings and you cannot ignore it. Like that has the power to change minds and open people up.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So go like now that you're doing the documentary thing. So what would be some of your if you what's some of the stuff out there that you say you would like to cover in that if you decided to do more of those? Like is there any subjects or anything out there you say like, I'd really like to go dive into that with a film crew?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, any issues based story. One of my first jobs was working at a international women's like grant uh, organization where they would just fund projects from women all over the world from their own communities. And it would be like, hey, we are in Tanzania, and our women's prisons don't have any feminine products. Like, we are women who have sisters in the jails. Will you please, like, uh, fund this project so that we can work on getting that involved in? Like, that stuff's amazing. So I think collaborating with any sort of like nonprofit that's doing amazing work. And I think that's, but then also I've been exposed to a lot more documentaries now that I'm doing these film festival circuits. And some really interesting documentaries are just like finding quirky people who do things that from the outside you'd be like, why does that man, you know, collect old broken down buses as if they were Pokemon cards? Like, what is making that man tick? And I saw a documentary exploring just that in New York a couple of weeks ago, and kind of weird, quirky things from the outside, and then you follow them around and you see, oh, this is really about that. So that stuff is less issue oriented, more human, I guess.
Just like human curiosity,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Yeah.
Two sides of that coin.
Um, yeah. So I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm a little like, where do we go from here?
Hmm.
Thinking about just the whole scratch claw push thing. Like if you did, let's just hypothetical this. If you did, you know, end up going, screw filmmaking, I'm gonna go do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that how do you think you would include creativity in your life? Do you think that you'd still do things on the side?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think short films, it's easier now than ever to make a short film. Um, Gear is higher quality at the cheapest level it's ever been. Um, so that will always be a part of it. I love to write. I also found that um, just small business. Like I at one point ran a small business in New York, and I kind of took a step back one day and was like, oh, this is just as creatively fulfilling as filmmaking. And because it's problem solving and pivoting
Mm.
and like, how do we reach these people and make them want to buy our stuff? And I thought that was awesome. So I think there's creativity and creative fulfillment in all sorts of industries and fields. Yeah.
I definitely think entrepreneurs and creatives share some DNA. I one of the things over the pandemic, part of it, one because I got invited on to a podcast called The Shrimp Tank for my other company, Nova Sopra, with my partner Clayton, and I
Hmm.
started listening to a few of their things. But there's definitely the entrepreneur crowd. Like you definitely have to. It's not just like find the thing, sell the thing, make money for the thing. There's a lot of extra stuff that goes into there that I think kind of tickles some of the scratches some of the same itches as the creative side, especially I guess like for filmmaking, because you said it's like so much is just problem solving.
Yeah. Producing, yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So what if I'd say like, okay, now that you've been doing it for a while, you're kind of getting even a little more seasoning in film school. What is one thing that you wish you had known at the start of your career that you've learned by now,
Hmm.
or a
Hmm.
couple of things?
I think, well, I mentioned earlier that my big goal these days is kind of balance and not losing myself in my work so much. And I think that if I could do it all over again, I would trust that everything will happen. Like, this is going to take a while, and kind of release myself from the pressure of reaching my goals as fast as I can. Part of that pressure was relieved when I switched from acting to behind the scenes, because, you know, as a woman actor, there is pressure of after you reach a certain age, there are not as many roles and your opportunities will go down. So I definitely was feeling a lot of anxiety about that. And when I switched to filmmaking, it was like, oh, I could direct my first feature film in my 40s and still be a major success. You know, at like that time, life is long, you know, and that's why I guess work to find balance and make sure that you are enjoying the day to day. Because at this point, you know, when I was younger, it's like, okay, well, if I just do this, if I just do this and throw all my eggs into this basket, then it's really going to change my life, right? And it's not. And I've seen incremental changes and incremental um, raising of the level of work that I'm able to do, but it's over time. So if I'm only sitting at my computer and doing work this whole time, then I can look back easily and just realize that I haven't been living externally as much as I should have been. So finding a well-rounded, balanced lifestyle in addition to the pursuit of the dream, I think is key. Biggest thing for me.
Nice.
So I want to ask one other thing. So since this is all about creating your own opportunities, and you kind of mentioned the actress thing,
Yeah.
because I found myself as an actress when I was younger, it there was this scarcity mentality. It was constant like, oh, I want opportunity, opportunity. Where is the next opportunity coming from? And just constantly being sort of hungry and looking out for that, but this scramble, this hustle to get there, right? Do you when you started creating your own opportunities, was that because of a lack of other opportunities? Was it just so that you could be more creatively fulfilled, or how did that transition go for you, I guess? What were the things you learned from making that transition?
Yeah, it was absolutely. I first dabbled in filmmaking because I wanted to create roles for myself as an actor. And I've met a lot of filmmakers at this point who kind of come from the same background. And then once we're here and we are behind the scenes, you realize that there's a lot more control over taking charge of your career. So for the people who like work their butts off, I could work my butt off as an actor and still I'm waiting for a casting director to be like, you, I choose you to level up no matter how hard I've worked. It's, you know, I could be too tall, too short, whatever.
Hmm.
With filmmaking, once you kind of transition to that side of the industry, if you work your butt off, you will see results, you know, because you can pick up a camera and go film something tomorrow easily. So um, yeah, I think it was recognizing that there are more opportunities for me if I take on a producer role and make the opportunities for you.
Did you find that when you started doing that, that people talked to you or looked at you differently, approached you differently?
Oh yeah. Um definitely. And like I'm guilty of this myself. Like I'll meet actors who say, "Oh, well, I'm an actor and I acted in this film." And I'm just like, "Oh, I just like found that I didn't respect them as much initially as like an actual filmmaker." I'm like, "Shannon, this is you." So, but people treated me that way too. I have classical acting training from American Conservatory Theater, and you know, I'm a trained actor, but I have stopped branding myself as an actor because introducing people as an actor director, yourself to folks as an actor director, gives a different taste than I'm a director. And I've stopped saying that, you know, at one point on my business card, I had director, editor, producer, writer, and it makes you seem less focused. I think so. And I've heard this a lot too, echoed in LA of like, okay, you make your money by being a gaffer, you want to be a DP, introduce yourself to people as a DP, like, you know, when you're at networking events and kind of, so yeah, definitely branding has something to do with it. And I think that the acting filmmaker brand initially when I started doing it was hurtful. But I think enough people have had success that maybe it's a little less than that now. People know to take those people more seriously.
Yeah, because like Greta Gerwig is out there directing and
Yeah,
writing and producing and
Yeah.
etc. And there's a lot of actors producing now. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
definitely.
think that's it's good to hear you say that, because I think that's the thing, is a lot of actors when they start off are just in that role of I'm an actor. And so they have the, I don't want to say it's just scarcity mentality, because that's not all of it. It's the sit back and wait mentality. It's this not forward thinking thing that's like, how can I strategically get myself into a place where I have more to offer than just being a body to fill a role, right?
Well, I mean, you think about it, acting is like one of the only art forms where you need someone's permission to do your art, because
Do
otherwise you're just lying to somebody. You
yeah,
know, it's
yeah,
like it's the
yeah,
only one. Like, you don't, when you're a painter, you don't need someone's permission to go like start slapping paint on a canvas, or a musician to start like strumming a guitar or something. But to be an actor, like, you have to have that, someone has to grant you that space to be
yeah.
okay. Now go pretend to be someone else or do the thing, and it's very unique in that way. And I think, like, in both of you, because is that, do you feel like that's probably what plays into that mindset, is having that wait for permission attitude?
Yeah, I think you can like stand on a street corner and recite monologues to your heart's content, but that's not building your career. You do need more people around you to be able to do the thing, for sure.
However, I would say that, when you were talking earlier about social media has changed that so much,
Hmm.
because, Shannon and I followed certain people during the pandemic who were like, oh, well, I can't act because nothing's happening. And they started their channels and have huge followings just in the last few years, because
Yeah.
they were like, well, and they started creating little sketches, doing little things, playing off themselves or their roommate, and now have created something. So I think that's the thing, is actors have to get more in the mentality of, I can do my art. It just requires me to move into that creator mindset, as opposed to I'm waiting for my line, somebody give me a line to say, right?
Oh, I have to jump in with this before I forget, because if it's, I feel I would be a bad friend if I did not share this with both of you and our listeners. There's a thing, I forget, it's something out of London. It's a bunch of British actors doing Shakespeare monologues, and they're doing probably like in street clothes, but it's
Hmm.
just them and a camera on them, and they are fire. There's a Damian Lewis doing the Friends Roman Countryman speech,
Oh,
and it's just like, and he's wearing like, it looks like, probably the stuff we'd be wearing right now, but it's just a camera close up on him, and that's what most of them are. It's just them in a close up, and them just bringing it. And I'm just thinking, like, man, for an actor, if you can do that, and I mean, granted, these are like, yeah, the top echelon of probably London Shakespearean actors, but I'm saying even something like that, like, I think nowadays, but with like YouTube and even TikTok, like, if you can just put yourself up there bringing the thunder, like with like just even like a monologue or something like that, that can get you out there. I would, something that just literally popped in my head, because I discovered this. I'm just thinking, man, like, anybody could do this, but these people are just coming here
hmm.
reading a monologue and they're crushing it.
That is so true. And also, for what both of you have just said, I feel like I need to retract my statement or amend it, because it's like it, you can't just stand and do a monologue. You have to film it and you have to wear all these other hats, right? You have to essentially become a producer. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
social media now, there are content creators out there and influencers out there who I, as a director, am just waiting for the day where I have a project where I can work with this Instagram person who has never been on TV, but I'm obsessed with them and I love them and they've made me laugh or made me feel something with their little mini monologues or whatever, the stories that they tell in this little vertical frame on my phone. And so that's absolutely a way to like make yourself known and take your work into your own hands and your craft into your own hands, for sure.
Well, look at Lily Singh. She started out on YouTube and eventually got her own show on like a network television thing. And if you go back and watch her early skits, they are basic as hell. I
Yeah.
mean, as far like, she had like no budget, and now she's got like classes on Skillshare, and like, again, got her like, I mean, granted, she was on the later shows, but still, to get there from YouTube, I mean, that's an accomplishment,
Oh
because
yeah.
whether you're a fan of hers or not, you gotta say like she had to know something to get all the way from, doing random like stuff on her phone to being like, now she's got this multi-camera setup. She's got a show. She's doing guests. She's interviewing The Rock, other big movie stars, and I'm like,
Mm,
you got to respect somebody who can make that leap.
absolutely. They're entirely self-made, you know? Yeah, mad respect.
I don't know if you guys follow Karen X Chang or
I think so.
so she directs, I guess, but she started just doing video tricks during the pandemic, like showing a lot of different, like she had a toy
Yeah,
truck and like putting the camera to that, or like how to fake having a one of those giant selfie sticks, or how to
yeah,
fake a
drone shot.
drone shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like she went from doing all this stuff at home during the pandemic to working with Meta. And then Meredith Bull, who's one of my favorite creators, she's pink hair, just had a baby. She like takes meme videos of cats and then makes them into songs.
I
And
love
as Shannon, as you would say, they're always a bop. Like, so she makes these great songs, and now she just posted the other day. She was like, "Oh, I'm in studio to record a voice or voices for this animated film, and guess who's here?" And it was Tara Strong, who was like,
Yeah,
animation royalty. And I was like, it's so good to see these creators who I love, who are creating their own stuff, get opportunities like that from what they're doing, you know?
absolutely.
So
That's really
props to
cool.
those people. But
Yeah,
it all
So,
comes
Shannon,
back to our vertical video thing we were talking about.
yeah, here we are.
so,
So
hey,
don't
awesome.
discount the vertical video.
I know. I'm sorry, but I'm a snob. I'm trying to get over it. But so like Shannon, tell the people where they can find you and your stuff if they want to learn more about you out there online.
Yeah, so my Instagram handle is at shannon.morrall. Pretty simple. And my website is shannonmorrall.com. And I just release stuff every once in a while. You can keep up with my stuff there, and definitely reach out and say, hey, send me a DM. I'm always looking to connect with people. So,
And also, where can we see the documentary film or any of your films? Are there any festivals that we should be aware of coming up?
yeah, I think.
This will be dropping sometime early August, probably. So
Yeah. So the Spear Spatula Submarine documentary should hit YouTube for general audiences in the late fall. And
Cool.
if you follow me on Instagram, I'll definitely let everybody know when it's out. But until then, there's the only confirmed one we have upcoming is the Fort Lauderdale Film Festival in November. Yeah.
awesome. Cool. Well, fingers crossed you get your Oscar for that. And maybe we'll see you in Antarctica next year.
Oh, yeah. Definitely going to follow up with you about that.
I look forward to your documentary on phytoplankton.
Me too.
That will be all for this episode. To keep up with the show, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Scratch Claw Push. If social media isn't your thing, you can contact us at scratchclawpush@gmail.com. This podcast has been a Carcutta Media production. For a full list of our podcasts, go to carcuttamedia.com/podcasts. This recording, or any portion thereof, may not be reproduced or used in any manner whatsoever without the express written permission of the publisher, except for use of brief quotations and review. Copyright 2023 by Carcutta Media, LLC. All rights reserved.